In our third episode, Brandon and I will explore the 4 styles of management and some tips for identifying your style. Let's dive right in.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Leading Strong, the place to be to level up your leadership effectiveness on one of your most important roles, engaging your employees. Managers are responsible for at least 70% of their employees' engagement. The best managers, like you, lead strong by constantly honing and developing the skills needed to keep their teams engaged. Your hosts, Darren Veresamy and Brandon Miller, are the co-founders of 34 Strong, a company that creates great places to work. Their team has worked in Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and small businesses to lead strong. Now over to Darren.
Welcome to Season 1 of Leading Strong, where we will dive deep to grow your manager intelligence. I'm your host, Darren Veresamy, here to serve you in your continued discovery and growth to lead strong. This episode of Leading Strong is brought to you by 34 Strong, where organizations just like yours become great places to work. To find out more, check out 34strong.com. Welcome to episode 3. I'm your host, Darren Veresamy, and joining me as our co-host today is Brandon Miller. We are both the co-founders of 34 Strong, and today's episode, we're going to be really unpacking the 4 types of management. Welcome, Brandon. Always great to spend part of the afternoon with you.
Hey, Darren. Great to be here. Thank you.
Right on. Well, in past episodes, Brandon, we've talked a little bit about laying the track for what manager intelligence is. We've talked in the past a little bit about how employee engagement ties into productivity, to profitability, to less safety incidents, right? For organizations. We even talked about how costly it is to the economy. Just the U.S. economy alone, it can be just massive, right? I think you even said there was one study that found with lawsuits and different pieces like that, it could be trillions of dollars that it was costing. Now, we know managers are a key piece of the puzzle in helping to create teams or create and sustain teams where people are engaged and showing up strong and feeling valued for being valuable. They're also at the core of the reason people actively disengage, the reason why people don't feel trusted, the reason why people go home with knots in their stomach or throwing up in the middle of the night like I used to do
Right.
under one manager many, many years ago. We left off last episode in talking about 4 different styles of management, right? So you talked about there's the authoritarian, there's the permissive manager, there's the uninvolved, and then there's the authoritative, right? So when we talk about these here, can you give us a little bit of an overview on what this whole process is? What do we mean by the 4 styles of management? And where do managers want to be so they can show up as those best bosses, making sure that their people are valued for being valuable?
That's right. So when we think about a good matrix to understand that there is warmth. So the way that we think about being inclusive and connecting with people and being highly involved with them, that's the top scale that we look for in a great boss. But at the same time, we need to have control. We need to be direct and decisive and have the ability to establish expectations and give people clear boundaries, hold them accountable, and be assertive. So both of those, when you combine them, create for an authoritative style. And that style is very effective. And it's actually, when you break it all the way down, it's related or directly connected to a strengths-based style. So authoritative managers do operate in a way where they're interested in a person's best abilities and how to accentuate those and grow those. And so know them deeply while at the same time holding them accountable that you're going to be that person. You're going to function in that way. So I'm going to know you and be a supporter, a developer, a great admirer of you and help you become the best you could be. But I'm also every bit as interested in, I want to see that excellence in increasing measure. That's that authoritative point that we aim toward.
Right. When we're aiming towards this here, I think an important nugget here, because we will talk about the differences in the other styles, right? So when we're looking at authoritative, everybody, it's not just a function of, I'm just going to make everything okay. We're going to eliminate the challenges. Sometimes think about it like this. Maybe you can recollect on your best boss that you've had, right? People can recollect on their best coach that they've had. Maybe there's that teacher. I bet when you think about that person, there was times they challenged you to your core and they were able to pull something out of you that you didn't even know that you had in yourself, but they saw it in you. So this is not a function of it's going to be an easy process that you're not going to need to challenge your people. You're working to create growth in them. And over the long haul, they'll create that arc and really lean into that. So let's go through these other styles that maybe we've seen a little bit more in our work experience. Maybe you've worked for somebody like that. Maybe you're working for somebody like that. Or maybe this has been your approach to management up until this point. That's okay. This is just a chance for us to kind of reflect and think about where you lie on these, knowing that we want to get to the authoritative component. Tell us about the authoritarian style of management.
So each of these styles really is a default to the style we were most taught. And either we mirror the style that we learned or were influenced by, or we repel against it. So we're either going to go along with a style because we just find it's almost pre-programmed, or we very intentionally say, no, I'm going to not be that style. So authoritarian, often associated with command and control, highly directive and demanding. Obedience is not just a consideration, it's an absolute. So this is where we're going to demand that you follow through. So the virtue of this style is it is very good at establishing the boundary and giving people clear instruction and holding them to make sure they follow through. I mean, there is an asset to this. Authoritarian leaders do get things done. I mean, they will absolutely get compliance because there are consequences if you don't follow their lead. And having grown up under authoritarian leadership, I can tell you there were definite consequences when I did not follow through on what was expected of me. And that is a hallmark of this. It can feel, though, at the same time that it's punitive. It can feel mean. It can feel cold. And that's the drawback of authoritarian, is that it loses the personal touch, the interest, the inclusion, the feeling that I matter, I'm valuable. And so that's where authoritarian does find its cap, because it might gain compliance. It will struggle to keep commitment.
Right. If we think about this style of leadership, as Brandon mentioned, there's times it's going to be very, very effective. And people that are following will want that, right? So if I'm out on the fire line, for instance, I'm a firefighter, and that fire chief is directing me, Darren, you go here, Brandon, you go here, because he's thought out or she's thought out exactly the path to cut off that fire and going through. I don't want to sit there and have a back and forth. I'm happy to just follow orders because I have my trust in that leader.
That's not the time to ask how you feel about that order.
Exactly. It's a function of, I need to follow orders. This is exactly what I signed up for and going through that. So there are going to be times where that can be very, very effective. Take us through the next one. So there's the permissive style of management, which is very, very different than the authoritarian style of management. Explain to us what we mean by that.
So when we think of permissive, we're thinking of non-directive. So this is the style where I am very interested in you as a person. I do want to know how you feel. I want to meet your needs, but I may not always be clear as to what I want. And if I do establish an expectation that you don't meet, I may not do well coming and telling you that it was a problem to me. So in the permissive style, we do see passive aggressive behavior. So I want you to do something, you don't do it. So then you start to feel me go behind your back, or you start to not experience my favor, but I don't tell you about it. So this is the drawback, is that it can feel warm. It can feel caring. It can feel as though you and I have a friendship even. But when it comes to accountability and assertiveness, this is where high performers really struggle under these leaders, because someone who's a high performer who does great work, sometimes their reward from a permissive manager is more work from someone else. And that doesn't always feel very good. And so though they may be liked, these leaders don't always gain respect, because that passive or inconsistent approach even to development seems almost aimless. Like, where are we going here? What are we actually doing? And it will frustrate certain personality types that feel like not getting. Now, with that said, it is interesting that when you think about permissive and authoritarian, it is not uncommon for a leader to flop between the two. So it's for a season, I'm going hard and I'm being, you need to get this done and you got to do that. And I'm being very direct. This is my own personal story, Darren. I'm a default authoritarian. And then I realized, oh, shoot, I went too far. And then I'll pull back like, oh, okay, just go ahead. Just do your thing. And I'll revert to permissive. And so that in and of itself is not helpful to go back and forth, because that juxtaposition does not lead to the best outcomes when we talk about engagement. And inevitably, we watch those people get tired. And that's where the uninvolved comes in.
Yeah. And before we get to uninvolved, I think it's really important to understand these are not, just want to reiterate that for all of our listeners. It's not that you're just camped in one of these styles. You can jump back and forth, as Brandon was going through, because we can have these realizations, but we overcorrect in some of these places here. What that can also do, as Brandon was mentioning, when we're in a state, we're operating from a lens of permissive or authoritarian, or we're vacillating between both of those. One of the key pieces he mentioned there is your key performance. Some of your top performers, you might actually see them start to disengage. So you might have worked really hard to attract some of those A players, but because of the permissive style that's going on, all of a sudden they're getting the work of others dumped on them because they're a good worker. What do they start to do? They start to check out. They start moving to the place of being disengaged. They start feeling, well, I'm not being valued for being valuable. I am a good performer, so you're just giving me more work, and we're coddling this other person. That could be detrimental to your team. And sometimes these behaviors, the fascinating part when we're in these different styles, we'll unpack more of this when we get into talking about all 12 of the manager intelligence skills as we go through them one by one. Sometimes our very behaviors as managers can create the things that we absolutely struggle with the most and dislike the most because of the way that we're acting. And we'll get into unpacking that, how our process and acting can trigger that. And those responses, that the things that drive us the most crazy, we could be the catalyst for making that. That's to come in some of the future episodes. So these two then, Brandon, this can move us to the place of the third one, which is uninvolved. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be that uninvolved leader?
I sure can. So once a leader has reached a point of frustration or exasperation or exhaustion, whatever combination of that, then we just start to ignore our people. And managers should reach this place of where, you know what, you do your thing. You go do you. I'm going to go shut the door. I'm going to go be by myself, or I'm going to check out emotionally. Do what you want. Once a person reaches that point, they are essentially guaranteeing disengagement, because not only is it cold because it feels like, I don't really care, do what you want, but it becomes where there's no boundaries now. It's whatever happens, happens. So in this space, it is very few. In fact, less than 2% can engage under that style of leadership for any length of time. So it almost effectively removes engagement from a team. And it magnifies, it more than doubles actively disengaged members of the team. So now there's revolt. Now I'm pushing back because I need something from you. In fact, what I tell leaders is, if you have children and you want to run an experiment, just ignore them for a little while. Just let them do what they want. Just act like you don't care. And tell me in about a week what the property damage looks like. Because there's going to be clear signs that the worst thing you can do to a human is ignore them. It's the worst. It's at least be mean or at least be nice or be caring. But don't do that, because that's very challenging. But when we meet people who are there, and I've run into many of them, it's usually the consequence of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I have what it takes to do this job. And they're lacking, as we talked about in our previous sessions, the skills to climb that ladder, to understand how to become that authoritative type of boss.
And here's the thing. Listen, if you're listening to this show and you're feeling like, I actually feel the heat of that, I feel the weight of what that's going through, that's exactly why you're in the right place. That's exactly why we're here. That's our mission, is to help managers turn that key, because we've realized we can train at the executive leadership place. Brandon and I have worked with thousands of them across the country, all over the place, people that are in executive leadership roles and different things. We also have realized the importance of creating meaningful impact in people's lives to the masses is in helping you manage people. And it's no easy piece. Again, we come back to the whole notion of what got us to be a manager. Oftentimes it's what from those 4 T's, Brandon? It's their tenure, right? And it's their tactical abilities of what it is that they've gotten to do. So it's their track record. of what they've done. So those pieces are a lot of times why people are promoted. And maybe you've been a great individual contributor. So it's okay if you're going through and you're like, that's me. Well, keep on listening because you can develop the skills to turn the corner on that. That's exactly what we seek to tackle in this and give you some of those pieces. So now take us away. Like we started talking about authoritative, right? We started talking about authoritative. How can we develop into an authoritative leader? I know we'll unpack more of this when we get to going through all 12 of the management intelligence skills. That's really going to be our listeners' keys. But tell us a little bit more about this style and what it really brings and how it actually creates and sustains engagement, Brendan.
Absolutely. So when we think about authoritative, very few of us naturally start here. So it's not as common that your default. I think the people who do are incredible and they're amazing. And if that is you, keep going. I mean, that is amazing because you not only care deeply about the people you lead and you're interested and invested and you really take the time to understand who they are and how to position them for success, but you equally are very interested in holding them accountable and being assertive, and you will not allow people to underperform, but you're going to work with them to get them to that place. And so the skills it takes to get there really are an intentional effort. And so from my own journey, and Darren, I think you might relate too, it's a continuum. It's a place of really recommending and seeing different places where we grow. And as we do, when we suffer setbacks, coming back to I'm developing new habits, I'm developing new behaviors. And that's a big part of the skills that you can incorporate. This is the wonderful news about human beings, is that though we have a certain set of strengths that are very innate within us, we'll call them core strengths, we have capacity to add strengths to ourselves through learned behaviors. It takes time, not all of them stick, but many of them will. And so we've seen many managers aspire to become great bosses, authoritative, strengths-based bosses, and reach that destination. They don't do it without effort and energy, some coaching, and having the right information to make the right decisions to get them to that outcome.
Excellent. And as we're going through, we're getting close to wrapping up today's episode. But for anybody that's listening, look back at these four. And one of the big things you can do right now, what's one of the great single trait that the best leaders have in common, Brandon? They're self-aware. They're self-aware. They're not necessarily the futuristic visionary, able to influence everybody, going out building relationships, but they're all self-aware. They know who they are and they know who they're not. So go back through in your time after this episode. I encourage you to really evaluate yourself based on learning about these styles. Are you authoritarian? Are you permissive? Are you uninvolved? Or are you authoritative? Or what's your combination? And as Brandon mentioned, to get to that authoritative place, it's not just you go to a training or you listen to the podcast episode and you fix all that, right? It's not a box to check. It's a function of what are the habits that we're developing, right? We have to stay hydrated every day. We can't just drink a glass of water at the beginning of the month and say, hey, we're good. We got to keep putting that in there. And that's how our body works. That's how we create healthy habits as managers. And that's a big part of what we're going to tackle. Brandon, I know in our next episode, I'm really excited. We're going to start diving into those 12 manager intelligence skills. You know, you shared what 3 of those were on the last episode. Our next episode, episode 4, is going to talk about the Individualize skill. But can you tell us about maybe 2 or 3 more of them as well that are foreshadowing what's to come in some of the future episodes?
Yeah, number 4 is inspiration. So this is the motivation skill. This is where I'm inspiring people. I'm uplifting them. I'm building that space within their spirit, their soul, their mind to believe more. They can do more. Very important skill for managers. Now, some of us think you have to have all the hype and you got to have all the outgoing personality qualities and be an extrovert. Not true. There are ways to inspire people that are very systematic and very consistent, and we'll talk about that. Being inclusive. Inclusion is a massive issue in our workplace today, and it's important that we understand all voices matter. We want to learn how to hear them, but inclusive does involve some key aspects around how to bring people in who don't feel like they're part of the tribe and build that mentality that we are a community. We need each other's resources. And then, though we are not your financial advisor's investment, we're going to talk about how you intentionally build others up and adopt a growth mindset where you're in a space of learning as a way of life and instilling that in people that you lead, and how that investment will equal their ability to advance with you. We don't want to be in the position where we're managing people that are static and stuck. We want to move them forward. Well, that requires us to be intentional with how we invest and really encourage a strong growth mindset toward developing themselves in the role that they place for your team.
Thank you so much for those insights, Brandon. So those are three that we're going to be unpacking in the future. Now, again, you're going to want to stay tuned. You're going to want to come back for episode number 4. Episode number 4 is going to take us into one of the critical manager intelligence skills, which is the foundation of all, which is individualize. That's what we're unpacking next time. We've talked a lot about the sea of uncertainty that 2020 has been. This is at the root of actually being able to customize our interactions with people and help to foster that trust. If there's ever a time to reset how we're connecting with people and reconnect with them on a very, very human level, it's right now as we're going through this. And it will help you in times of certainty and uncertainty. Individualize is going to be the skill that helps you get there. We look forward to unpacking that with you next time. Thank you so much for joining in. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
If you want to continue your growth in Leading Strong by hanging out with others committed to Leading Strong, join one of our LinkedIn or Facebook groups by looking for The Leading Strong Show. The truth is, organizational results like productivity, profitability, and low employee turnover rise and fall based on employee engagement. The world is starving for strong leaders as they not only impact an organization's performance, they create massive influence on an employee's overall health and well-being. If you want to learn more about becoming a great place to work or 34 Strong's signature Leading Strong programs, simply go to 34strong.com, where you will also be able to access resources you can start using immediately and stay connected with us. I want to thank you for sharing this episode with everyone you know who will benefit. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting channels, and please leave us a review. A big shout out to Wendell Fishman for writing and arranging the tune Aunt Lion for Leading Strong. Remember, everyone deserves a great place to work, and any workplace can be great. You can create culture by intention and design, and change happens with every life you touch. I am Darren Verasamy, here to help you lead strong. Until next time, my friends, I'm out.